began his career in public service as a staff assistant to President Ronald Reagan. He later served as governor of Utah from 2005 to 2009. He has served each of the last 5 U.S. presidents in critical roles, including most recently U.S. Ambassador to China and U.S. Ambassador to Russia. He and his wife, Mary Kay, have 7 children, and full disclosure, his daughter, Abby, was my favorite host on The View. All right, former Governor Huntsman, welcome to the Equality Forum.
Troy, this is great. Thank you so much. You make me sound better than I am. That was a great warm-up.
Awesome.
So thanks to you and to Equality Utah generally, because this is a Republican, this is a primary.
Right.
And people forget that. This is a big deal.
Yeah.
I think it's unprecedented.
Maybe the first.
So, yeah. So to you and Bruce Bastian, David Parkinson, and others who have really done a phenomenal job in bringing the I'd say communities plural together is a wonderful tribute to you and the group.
I remember before I was involved with Equality Utah, I came to the Allies Gala, and you and Mary Kay came when you were the governor.
Right.
It was the first time I'd ever seen a Republican governor, and I thought, wow, he's governor for us too. That was a big deal at the time, you know. And so I'm really interested in your personal journey. How did you get to a place where your heart could open to our community?
An overriding philosophy for me as a human being and as an elected official has always been equality under the law.
Right.
So as a Republican, I thought that's what Abraham Lincoln always stood for.
Right.
Equality under the law, not for some, but for all. And so, you know, I grew up in North Hollywood, California, when my dad worked for his uncles in the egg business. And you couldn't help, even as a young kid, noticing the tectonic shifts that were happening socially with the LGBTQ community, designated differently at the time, and the discussions that were ensuing. I mean, it was a fertile time politically, and you know, so I carry those impressions with me as I have through life. And then you find yourself, you know, in your neighborhood in Salt Lake, and you know, you have a gay neighbor. A friend who comes to you one day and says, my partner died and I was not able to visit him in the hospital. And it's like, what is going on here? I had another friend who was a name widely recognized, whose son passed tragically. And he asked me to speak at the funeral, which I did. And I had just been elected governor at the time. And I made mention publicly of him and his partner who were there in attendance. And the tears streamed because he had never heard those words, particularly from a governor. And I thought it was just the right thing to do. You know, it's equality under the law. Right. And I have a niece who's gay. I have a running mate, Michelle Kufusi, mayor of Provo, whose daughter is gay. Yeah. She actually married them in Provo
as mayor.
So, you know, they're part of our family. They're part of our community. Right. And with each step along the way, as I would look at the deficiencies in terms of how we treat some communities as compared to others, really grated at me as an American who believes in freedom and liberty for all and equality under the law. So that's what informed me most of all in my journey. And I had the good fortune of having friends when I was elected governor. One friend, and I'll name him, Gordon Storrs.
I know Gordon,
who would come into my office. Yeah. And Gordon became a great friend during the campaign. Because as we were campaigning, he and his partner came up and said, we really want to support you. Right. And I said, love to have you. He said, you know, we're gay. And I said, come on in, you know, we're open to everybody.
Awesome.
But he would come in my office as a newly elected governor, and he would take the time to sit just one-on-one and say, I want you to understand some issues through my eyes. Mm-hmm. And I want you to understand my journey. And it was kind of a first time that I had really sat down in a political context and had that conversation with somebody like Gordon. Mm-hmm. And I'm forever grateful for him. And for the education he brought to me. And I just listened and I learned and I tried to put myself in his shoes. And it was transformational. And it showed the power of information, knowledge, education, sharing stories and experiences. I think that's been an important part of the journey for all of us.
That's how hearts open.
Yep.
So I want to take you back through time, okay? It's 2009.
Yeah.
Amendment 3 is the law of the land in Utah, which bans any form of relationship recognition for same-sex couples. Proposition 8 is passed in California. There is so much political acrimony in the state. There are protests and rallies, and we are at each other's throats. And this is before my time at Equality Utah, but the organization came forward to the legislature with a Common Ground initiative, which was a series of bills to provide legal protections for LGBTQ families. As the governor of Utah, you broke rank with Republicans and you supported the Common Ground initiative and civil unions. This was 6 years before it actually passed as law here in the state. Why? That's a political risk for you. Why did you do it?
Because I felt it was the right thing to do. And I had enough conversations and enough interaction with friends in the LGBTQ community to help me understand their journeys, their needs, and a heightened need for equality in our state. And it bothered me until we got to full equality, particularly on marriage. We were deficient.
Right.
And although I couldn't come right out and say marriage equality, I wanted to support a very important incremental step that would get people talking about it. And I thought, when the governor talks about something or announces something, that opens a floodgate.
It does. And 6 years later, 6 years later, it all became reality. And the Utah legislature passed non-discrimination protections.
Some would say that it never is a positive thing in politics to lead out on issues.
Right.
Everybody follows,
right?
Because there's a lot of pain that you have to endure when you lead out. And I look back at the commentary and the hate mail I got. I remember so well what people in my own office, now in power, said about it.
Right.
And I kept a couple of letters in my drawer as governor that were the most hate-filled letters I'd ever received.
Right.
And I tried to, again, put myself in the shoes of those in the community who have to endure this kind of thing, and did, particularly in the early days, and some still do. Yeah. And I would pull the letter out every now and again from respectable people.
Right.
And I would reread it just to be reminded of what hate can be. And it reinforced me. It gave me greater resolve to carry on and to do the right thing. So I was alone. I didn't have a lot of allies at the time, but I felt in my heart it was exactly the right thing to do.
All right, so this will give you some perspective, I think. This comes from last year. Okay, the Public Religion Research Institute came out with a survey that revealed that 77% of Utahns support LGBT non-discrimination laws. We tied with Vermont as second place in the nation. New Hampshire beat us. But Utah has higher public support for non-discrimination laws than liberal California and New York and Oregon.
Imagine
so
that.
Does that surprise you?
Imagine, it does not, because of the goodness of the hearts and souls of people in this state.
Yeah.
Once people understand, once there is a thorough discussion, people have big hearts, and they're embracing and tolerant and accepting in this state. Right. Those numbers are just the reverse of what they were in 2009.
Right. We've come a long way.
You can get a sense of the fury that came toward the governor. But it started a conversation. And people look back on that, and some remember, some don't. But they remember that may have been a discussion that created a turning point of sorts.
It certainly was. So in contrast, I'm curious about your experience as ambassador to Russia for the Trump administration. This country has a notorious track record on LGBTQ rights. We've seen laws exist to censor queer literature, and public sentiment seems to be against the community seems to be on the rise there. So how do minorities fare in those kind of conditions?
Poorly, very poorly. I made it a point both in China, which suffers the same plight, those who are members of the LGBTQ community. They are shunned and discriminated against and persecuted. And they saw the U.S. Embassy as a safe haven in both cases. And we would allow young kids to gather in the U.S. Embassy and to talk and to share stories and to feel a sense of strength coming from American values. And, whether it's under a Republican or a Democrat, because I've served both overseas, the American values, that spotlight that is American values, is bright. And people in Russia know that. And they see our flag and they see our U.S. Embassy as a safe haven for things like LGBTQ rights. And we would be, targeted by the Russian government for doing that kind of thing, but it was an extension of our values as Americans, our acceptance, our tolerance, our sense of equality under the law. So I saw that firsthand in both countries. And you know what? It made me proud to be an American.
Yeah.
Sometimes we come around late in the game, but we come around.
Yeah.
And we eventually find our sweet spot of equality.
Okay.
And that's where we are.
Yeah. Well, let's expand the conversation a bit. When we look at data in our state, we see that while women make up 50% of the population, they are grossly underrepresented in the legislature, in C-suites and boards and commissions. So what can we do? As governor, how can you elevate women and minorities in your administration and in our state?
Well, they can follow the example of women in higher education in this state, where now half of our leading institutions, our universities, are run by women. You can look at some of the largest cities in Utah, which are now run by women.
Right.
So Michelle Kafusi, who I brought in as my running mate, is the first woman to run Provo in its entire history.
Right.
So I don't think, there's no success like success.
Right.
And when you see role models like Michelle, when you see role models like the president of the University of Utah, among others, that serves to stimulate and inspire others who might be saying, no, there's a ceiling. But no, contrary to that, there are examples of success. So, you can say it's nice to have maybe a quota system here or there. I have found that there is nothing like somebody or a few breaking through and actually getting the job done and creating hope and a pathway for those who would like to follow.
Because when you're a minority and you see somebody that looks like you in a position of power, it fills you with hope. It fills you with a sense of possibility.
That's right.
Right?
Yep.
So that's why it's so important. And we'd love to see your administration really reflect, the people of Utah. People of color.
Yeah.
We would love to see LGBT people in your administration.
This is such an important point. I had an Ethnic Affairs Advisory Council that has since been closed down. And my goal was to bring people in to listen.
Right.
Because you've been given 2 ears and 1 mouth, and we rarely use it in that ratio. And,
Right.
and to hear and to see what can be done. I'm raising a Chinese daughter, and I'm raising an Indian daughter. And they're old enough now to be aware of who they are.
Right.
My daughters of color were treated differently in Russia.
Right.
Because of that. They learned these lessons early on. And I say, I want a state that has representatives, that has leaders and role models who look like they look.
Yeah.
Not just for look's sake, but for performance sake, because these girls and people like them have so much to give. They're so energized.
Yep. They're
so well educated and so passionate about being an American.
Right.
That you want to see them get the same shot as everybody else.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So many people in Utah are becoming more familiar with the gay community, the lesbian community, the bisexual community, but there's still a lot of people who don't understand the T in LGBT, which is our transgender population. And as a result, we've seen a wave of legislation in states all across the country that specifically target transgender kids, transgender adults. And so, what we would love to see in our next governor is someone who is willing to come in and meet with the transgender community, get to know them, get to know their lives, get to know their struggles. Can we expect that from the Huntsman administration?
Of course you can.
Awesome.
I will do exactly for the T community what I have done for all other communities.
Right.
It's a listening ear, and it's an ultimate goal and philosophy of equality under the law. Yeah. I was reminded, Troy, that, so I have 2 sons serving in the U.S. Navy. What did the U.S. Navy do last week? They announced that this longstanding petition by a transgendered officer would be accepted, and that they would be able to serve with all rights and privileges like anybody else. Yes. And I saw that. I said, again, the United States military is ahead of everybody else in terms of doing what is
There is a legal battle right now. There is a legal battle.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. There always is. Yeah. There always is.
Right. So yeah, and again, I would love the opportunity, for you to meet with transgender veterans, and really just, again, hear about their service, hear about their stories. And so we can make that happen.
Always an open door with me.
Awesome. Excellent. Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about the nation right now. We are living in this hyper-polarized, hyper-partisan era. And I don't know, I heard the 60s were bad. But I've read about them, but it seems really bad right now. And especially if you are a minority, if you are a refugee or an immigrant or a person of color, LGBT, often it feels like we are the targets of a lot of divisive rhetoric. A lot of it comes from the top down. As governor, what can you do to really help unite our state and help us unite our country?
I think messaging here, Troy, is so important because we are all Americans at the end of the day.
Right.
We all have one vote.
Right.
We all share the same basic promise of our founding documents, given to everybody equally. And when we forget that and start targeting individuals or communities as less than, that is wholly un-American. And unfortunately, politics in particular has become a professional game. In the old days, it was you go out and run for office and you get volunteers and you get campaign managers. Today, you have entire industries built up around opposition research, about fake, messaging. And I just look at, the messaging on our Facebook and other social media, the trolls.
Yep.
You can't even get messaging through sometimes because you got to break through the trolls. And listen, I've seen the Russians are the best in the world at doing this kind of stuff. And a lot of Americans don't even realize that it isn't even America that is pushing and promoting these narratives. And we have to, we benefit from the advance of technology, but it's a detriment in some senses in the way that it divides us and polarizes us. We have to rise above it and remember that we've all been given a promise as Americans. And we have to strive every day and work valiantly year after year to make sure that promise of being an American and being a Utahn is salient for all citizens.
Excellent. Okay, all right. So now it is time for our LGBTQ pop quiz. So we're going to see how you do. Okay, 3 questions. All right. According to the Gallup survey, Salt Lake City is per capita the 10th gayest city in America. True or false?
Oh, I think it's better than that. I would say false.
That's false. We are the 7th gayest city in America.
That's right. I read that somewhere.
Gayer than Manhattan and Los Angeles. So, yeah, take that, Hollywood. Okay, all right. Category is world famous gays. What famous gay mathematician helped Allied forces crack the Nazi Enigma code and ultimately help end World War II?
That would be Alan Matheson Turnig, I think. PhD from Princeton University. That's
right. Very good job. Excellent. Final question. LGBTQ Utahns and Latter-day Saints share a mutual love for Broadway musicals. What was the last Broadway musical you saw? And give me a 1-sentence review.
Oh, I haven't seen a Broadway musical in a very, very long time.
Mary Kay, we have to work on this.
Yeah, instead of Broadway musicals, because we've been busy, and overseas, you just don't have access to this.
All right.
I watch Tan France on his program.
Do you watch Queer Eye?
Yeah, I have, and it brings it all home here to the state, and with probably our highest profile member of the LGBTQ
I think community. You're still going to fail with that question, but that's all right. Okay.
2 out of 3 ain't bad.
Not bad at all. You got Alan Turing, that's fantastic. So, all right, Governor Huntsman, thank you so much for being part of the
Troy, it's a great honor and privilege. Thank you for all you're doing.
Thank you.